Welcome back, guys. Or if you're new here, this is Automotive Anonymous, and that's the all-new 2024 Ford Ranger. And even though it's been reasonably refreshed, it still keeps a lot of the key characteristics and components that distinguish the Ranger from the other mid-sized trucks. So today I get to share the good, the bad, and the ugly of the all-new generation Ranger to help you guys at home decide if it might be worth your time and money. So you can expect to see a walk-around, all the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 on GPS, and then my final thoughts. And huge thanks to Goody Motor Ford, which is the oldest Ford dealership in Idaho. I'm going to link them below if you're interested. Otherwise, let's dive right in with this review. But if you're new to the Ford Ranger, you really need to know that these first came out back in 1983, and Ford sold 3 generations of them, and they actually did phenomenally well, selling up to a couple 100,000 units every single year, up until about 2005, when sales did start to die off in the 3rd generation. But then Ford brought it back in 2019 to the United States market with the 4th generation, which this looks very similar to, but sales had not returned to their prior level. I guess 2020 did pretty well when Ford sold over 100,000, but the other years, you know, there's a lot of competition to the Ranger, like the Tacoma, the Frontier, the Colorado, and the Canyon Twins. So with this new 5th generation that started right now for 2024, I think Ford's hoping they up their game a little bit with this one, and I think they're trying to get back their sales numbers that they used to have. But unlike the F-150 that literally has a bazillion trim levels and configurations, Ford's trying to keep the Ranger a little bit more straightforward and a little bit more in line with the other competition, so there's only 4 trim levels. And the base XL trim level starts at about $32,000, and then there's the XLT, and then there's the Lariat, such as this, which starts at about $43,000, and then there's the top of the model line, the Ford Ranger Raptor, and that thing starts at about $55,000. So the top level Raptor Ranger is almost twice as much as the base XL Ranger. So there might be one for every budget, and there's a lot of variants and a lot of different options you can pick between those. So after destination delivery, you're going to actually pay about $50,000 for a loaded out Ranger Lariat like this. But with the basic Lariat, you get a lot of options like the 12-inch display, dual climate controls, you get the B&O system, which actually sounds pretty good, and then the basic features that are new, and especially for the upper trim levels of the Ranger, include the fully boxed frame, acoustic glass. This one does have leather seats, and honestly, it's a pretty nice ride. There's a lot of configurations, but if you don't want all those fancy bits, you can opt for the XL or the XLT and save quite a bit of money. I'm going to point out the power numbers and what's under the hood more in just a minute, but I do want to mention that Ford is staying competitive with the competition, offering 3 different power levels. But unlike the Canyon, the Colorado, and the Tacoma, it's not 3 different power levels from the same basic engine. There's going to be 3 basic engines under the hood of this Ranger. So there's this basic 2.3 liter, which was also in the 4th generation Ranger. But pretty soon Ford's going to introduce the 2.7 liter twin turbo V6 out of the Broncos and the F-150s. And then, if you do want to spend nearly $60,000, you can get the Ranger Raptor that has the 3 liter EcoBoost. That's also found in the Explorer ST, and that's about a 400 horsepower engine. So Ford is staying very competitive, and kudos to them. I also hope that Ford Performance figures out a tune for this 2.3, just like they did on the 4th generation that offered about a 45 horse jump in power. Not bad for a tune option that is warranted. For being a mid-sized truck, these are actually sized pretty well. It's about 17.5 feet long. The bed is about 5 feet. The wheelbase is about 10.5. The width, when the mirrors are sticking out, is 6.5, and the height is about 6.1. This one specifically has about 9.3 inches of ground clearance, a 373 final drive ratio, which is actually quite good, and it can do a full circle in 42 feet. But then the weight of these could be as little as 4,200 pounds in a stripped-down XL configuration, or up to about 5,300 pounds if you're going with the Raptor. This one specifically has a payload capacity of 1,527, so you can carry 1,500 pounds of people and stuff between the cab and the bed. And then it can tow anywhere from 5,500 to 7,500 pounds, depending on how your Ranger is configured. The last few things to mention here is when you lock the Ranger, the gas door does not lock, so the bums can attempt to siphon some of your 18.8 gallons of 87 or higher octane. But the range is pretty impressive because with this 2.3 liter, it actually gets about 21 city, 25 on the highway. So your max road trip and range could be as good as about 450 miles. And then it comes with an all-terrain Goodyear Wrangler tire. It's a 255, 65, 18, and the sidewall is actually pretty impressive for a bone stock tire on an 18-inch wheel. And then this is the remote again. So you have unlock, lock, remote start, panic button, but you can just leave that in your pocket because you do have proximity key features to lock and then lock the Ranger right there. But the driver's side door panel has a lot of soft touch, nice materials, but unfortunately they are mostly dark, and there's a few different varieties, but overall it's a pretty uniform design. The armrest width is actually pretty good. You do have to get used to the handle if you're not used to that on the Ranger, and then you do have kind of a metallic painted flake right there on that accent piece, which is pretty cool. Three-way power adjusted seats. You do have a pretty good sized snack pocket, but it is very thin for how you're going to slide stuff in. And then unnamed speaker there, but we do know that this is the B&O system. Otherwise, you have a running board for the front and the rear, Ranger all-weather mats, you have the hood release, the OBD2 port, the rubberized pedals, your lighting options, knee airbag, which is really nice. The Ranger does have quite a few safety features, ventilation, lighting, your lighting stock right there, and then your heated leather adjustable seat. No embroidery or stamping in or anything, but it does look good. It's not overly bolstered, so people are going to fit in here quite well. Just don't go around a corner too fast because you might slide out of it. Otherwise, it's really comfortable. Sitting inside the new Ranger is actually really nice, and it's a little bit different than I was expecting. The armrest is comfortable, everything's easy to get to, easy to, define. I do wish that the 6 o'clock handle is a little bit better on the wheel. And it is heated, it is leather wrapped, but you'll notice that you have really good forward-facing visibility. Even the dashboard slopes down, and then the hood slopes down, and it honestly makes me start to feel like I'm sitting way too high, yet I still have a couple inches above my head at 5'11". Another issue I've noticed is when I sit in here, everything feels really low down here. And even say, let's fire it up real quick. It roars to life, built Ford Tough appears. But even to get to the heated seats or the heated steering wheel, you have to go through this silly little display. And no one likes touchscreen controls like that over having physical buttons. So you literally have to look from up here down to here to make sure that you're not picking the wrong button because you so easily could. And that's a problem. I really don't like it. Otherwise, the 12-inch display looks nice. You have your voice and volume controls on the left. You can go through cruise control here, and the right more goes through the center display. You have a couple options on this one. So you have a few things you can look at, but it's kind of the typical Ford layout in there. The horn actually is really loud, really impressive, and it must have come from, the Ford parts bins for some of their bigger trucks. But otherwise, you have physical buttons for HVAC, again, kind of small, kind of down out of the way. I'm really having to reach down to get to those. I wish they were a little bit more obvious. And just cut the screen in half, give me those physical controls. But the backup camera, it's actually decent quality. You do have a 360-degree cam, which I really like too. That's nice. Charging pad, extra storage, some USB plugins down there. You have a spot to hold your keys or your 2 cups. You have an electronic parking brake, more parking features, traction control, auto start stop, and then you have a button that kind of shows you some off-road modes. When you're not moving, it shows you the camera. When you are moving, it shows inclinometer and how your movement is. Otherwise, you have a lot of drive modes on the Ranger. Probably about 7 of them. And then you can also go to 4 high or 4 low that way. And then when you open up the center console, you have a lifty tray with a 12 volt and actually an average amount of storage in here for a mid-sized truck. And then up top, you have a place to hold your sunglasses. You have some LED lights up here. You have some garage door settings on this Lariat. And then you have incandescent lighting when you check yourself out. And the sun visor does slide, which is nice. But with that said, let's turn this off and hop in the back. Otherwise, the back door panel does look like it was designed by the same people who designed the front, because it's all black, soft touch materials, and a wide armrest with the same style of handle and a full-size snack pocket, which I really do appreciate. That actually is a really nice back bench. It lifts as a unit. There's a strap on each side, and then you can get to your storage and some of your tire changing tools down there. You do have all-weather mats, and of course the running board. Seat belts, you have headrests that can fold down on any of them. But when you climb into the Ranger, I do wish you had, say, like a B-pillar handle right there. But at 5'11", I have a few inches in front of my knees. I have a storage pocket for my phone or some graham crackers. I have some plugins and a household-style outlet, but it's only 400-watt max, which is actually pretty average. And then you have a small armrest with cup holders. So you can either have your arm on your side or you can have a cup. It's up to you, but you probably can't have both unless you're the only occupant back here. But even my head, it's not rubbing against the ceiling. I see that there's an airbag on the pillar. And overall, it's actually a pretty nice place to be for a mid-sized truck. I honestly think the rear of the new Ranger looks really good, even though it's not that much different than the old one. I do like that Ranger is stamped in, and we have, the basic features of a truck. You do have a soft lower tailgate, but you don't have all the flex tailgate features that honestly a lot of people just don't need and don't even know how to use. You can put clamps here, you have a yardstick to measure with, and then a spray and bed liner. Remember, this is only a 5-foot bed, or maybe about 6 foot with the tailgate. The payload capacity, again, is only about 1,500 pounds, and that includes anyone inside the cabin. And then you have some outlets right here. You have some tie downs throughout. And honestly, 5-foot bed is probably more than most people need, unless this is really a work truck. Then you're probably going to be looking at the Super Duties. And it's a pretty easy to lift tailgate as well. But if you get a ride shotgun in the Ranger, door panel, again, basically identical to the driver's side, minus a few of the extra controls and memory seats. Otherwise, you get your own running board, you get power options, it's still heated, and again, you have your own climate controls, even as the passenger. So my backpack couldn't be more aesthetic than it is right now. Otherwise, Ranger all-weather mats, no transmission tunnel storage, but you do have a little bit of a loop right here, which is kind of neat. You have an upper tray, you have an upper glove box, and then the regular glove box is locking with the key that's hidden inside your remote, but there's no plugins in here. Anyways, with that said, let's come around to the front. I'm going to pop the hood and I'll show you what the EcoBoost 2.3 liter looks like, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But under the hood of this Lariat is the 2.3 liter EcoBoost 4-cylinder single turbo. It makes about 270 horsepower, 5,000 RPM, and about 310 foot-pound-feet of the torque at 3,000 RPM. So it's really punchy around town, especially with how it's paired to the 10-speed Ford transmission. But overall, I actually think the Ford engineers did a really good job designing this one. Induction through the grille, through the air filter, through the turbo and the piping and the plumbing. Ultimately, this is the exhaust side and the turbo's down there. Ultimately, this is the intake side over here. You have the oil dipstick, the oil fill, you have all of your reservoirs, you have your fuse box, your battery, and a whole lot of room under here to do basic maintenance and modifications if you desire. The serpentine belt, it does look like a tool belt system, but overall, I think it's a pretty good layout, and these engines actually seem to be really reliable. Anyways, let's drop the hood, take it for a drive. Initial driving impressions of the 24 Ranger Lariat. You know what, handles pretty decent for a mid-sized truck, which is what full-size trucks used to be like, because this one's fairly big. You know, it can be the minimum size needed to fit a full-size adult in the back seat. It actually feels like you sit up really high. The visibility overall is pretty good, and I haven't had any concerns with any of that, minus having the Maroni sticker on the window back there. But otherwise, visibility is pretty good. I do feel, though, like I'm actually sitting up a little bit too high to be inside of this vehicle, because the knobs, everything is so low. To get to your phone, if it's wirelessly charging, it's actually really low, and it feels like you're sitting up about 3 inches too high. And I'm only 5'11", but when you have to get up to speed, currently I have it in sport mode. Still in sport mode. Let's see what it can do. That pulls pretty good for a little 2.3 liter engine. Not much bigger than a 2 liter soda bottle of displacement, but dang, does it put the power down well. And hopefully Ford comes back out with the Ford Performance Tune that's warranted on these in the near future. But overall, it seems to do a really good job driving. There is definitely some body roll, and it feels very floaty, if that makes sense, kind of like a Cadillac. The brakes do a good job. There's a little bit of nosedive, but with, 40% brake pedal just now, that wasn't bad. And it'll easily spin the rear tires when you turn the corner and get back up to speed, even at partial throttle like I am right now. I do have it in kind of the off-road setting where you can see your, inclinometer and your side degrees. But when you go slow, it turns into the front-facing camera, which I do appreciate, and I'm glad that you have that on more than just the Ranger Raptor trim level. But overall, I think this is a pretty good vehicle. The B&O speakers, I was listening to them on the way out here, and they did sound fairly decent. Handles, like a truck. It feels comfortable, though. The heated seats, even has a heated wheel in this one. So for 50 grand, you get the new Ford Ranger. You get a lot of features. And honestly, I think a lot of people are going to like this and probably like it quite a bit. Oh, that's not the road we want to turn on. The 2.3 liter paired to this 10-speed is really responsive. I do wish that you could see what gear you were in, kind of like the F-150s, how they have that counter going on the side. And you don't have paddle shifters or anything. You just have to do it manually through the shifter on the side if you want. But overall, It's a nice vehicle, handles really well, and I'm sure you guys want to see what it does 0 to 60. So let me get to the private road and show you what it can do. True 0 to 60 came in at 8.04 seconds. That was with two-wheel drive, sport mode on, and a little bit of a launch. Did sound like we got some wheel spin at the beginning. And in 4 high, doing the exact same thing, 0 to 60 was a second faster at 7.06. Not bad given the fact that we are basically 3,600 feet above sea level, so even though we're turboed, we're still down on power a little bit. Let's get to my final thoughts. My final thoughts of the refreshed 5th generation 2024 Ford Ranger, especially this Lariat configuration, is honestly, I do think it's a really nice truck. You feel like you sit up really high, it feels really capable, and it's actually pretty punchy. Doing a 7-second flat 0 to 60 up here is actually a really decent time for what that is. Overall though, is it worth $50,000? Or would I maybe buy a cheaper trim level and modify it myself if I want some extra goodies? I don't know. I think there's one for every budget, including the $60,000 Ranger Raptor. So what ultimately matters is your thoughts and opinions. What do you think of the new Ranger? Is it worth it? Do you like it more than the Colorado, the Canyon, the Frontier, or the Tacoma? There's a lot of options. And thankfully, options usually drive up competition and makes each manufacturer have to step up their game a little bit. So for that, I'm glad there's a new Ranger, and I'm glad Ford is offering multiple powertrains and a lot of great options. So with that said, if you guys got anything out of this video, please consider liking this video. Comment your thoughts and opinions below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, I'll link this one below if you're interested. Goody Ford is a fantastic dealership, and I hope to see you again. Until next time, see ya.